Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade on Blogging Heads TV, and my guest today is Douglas Lain. Doug, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am the publishing manager of Zero Books, which is a critical theory and leftist imprint out of the UK, although I'm obviously the ugly American who's working for the imprint. I'm also a novelist. In the background, you can see my novel Bash Bash Revolution, which is the most current work. I run a YouTube channel for Zero Books and a podcast, and I've been on your show, I think, before to talk about Kill All Normies, which is one of our big books, and I've interviewed Glenn Lowry. Big fan of Blogging Heads overall. I'm even a member of the Parrot Room with Mickey and
bless your heart for
right,
that.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming back on. Yeah, it was about 3.5 years ago when we spoke about Kill All Normies, Angela Nagle's book, and so you emailed me about coming on to talk about something that happened within the last week or so, and why don't you just explain what happened?
Well, I put out videos every week, or try to hit a weekly schedule to put out a collage video or a video essay weekly that both promotes our books and gives me a vehicle for my own expression. And what I have been doing in the last month is exploring some of the ideas in Christopher Lasch's books, The Agony of the American Left and the Culture of Narcissism. But when you make things for YouTube, you also try to find an angle that will hit the current zeitgeist or the whatever's trending. And so I thought about a week or so ago that I would do a video about right-wing conspiracy theories, specifically the conspiracy theory around something called the Great Reset, and see if Christopher Lasch's ideas might have or provide us with an avenue to understand the moment a little bit better than we already do. And it ended up being a diatribe, I think, against the abandonment of socialism and the taking up of a capitalist progressive politics and statist politics instead. But, looking back to the turn of the century, meaning the turn of the 19th into the 20th century for that turn, or in the middle of the 20th century, really. But so that what happened was I put up this video on the Great Reset, and what I do is I put it up and then I let the algorithm have its way with it like overnight, and then in the morning I'll write a description and release it. So like you want the algorithm to be able to look at your video, especially if you're making a collage, to make sure there's nothing that's going to set off a copyright claim or be a problem. And if there is, you can re-edit or something. But that seemed to be fine. I released the video. Actually, no, the truth was there was a copyright claim on some music in the original video version, so I re-edited it, put it up again. Okay, so just
a pause for a second. So the algorithm. Okay, so we're gonna be talking about multiple algorithms, I guess. But if you upload a video to YouTube, there is some sort of internal algorithm or something that scans the video in some way that normal people can't understand to see if you're really like uploading someone else's music video or uploading like a movie or something that is copyrighted. And they've figured this how to do this very well, because on the Blogging Heads channel, behind the scenes, you can see they find when other people have posted snippets, even just snippets of Blogging Head videos, and they like show it like the dashboard. I can see it. And no one is. So this is not like stealing Iron Man 3 or something. But that's what primarily I assume they're worried about. Copyright claims from big international companies and stuff like that.
I had made this standard appeal to support us on Patreon, and I had taken music from a YouTube video called Rewind, and I assumed that since it was YouTube putting it out that it was part of their YouTube audio library, but it turned out the music that I had lifted from that Rewind video was actually copyright. They must have had permission and I didn't, so I took it down and used some music that I purchased from a royalty-free library instead and put that up. And so that was That was the first change. And then what happened was while I was uploading the new version, the old version was removed.
Mm-hmm.
And
so then, you hadn't taken it live. It was just
right. It was unlisted.
Okay.
And it was removed as an unlisted video. Mm-hmm. And then so I put up the new version that got through with no copyright problems. I made it public, and then it just sort of sat there. It didn't get views, or if it got some views, but it didn't get nearly the same velocity of views as I would have expected. So I thought, well, they removed this video, and I saw already that they had said I violated community standards, and I appealed that right away because I thought, well, no, I didn't. You know, wasn't disputing the World Health Organization's, because the reason they gave for the takedown of the original unlisted video was that it violated community standards by providing misinformation about COVID, and specifically by disputing the recommendations on social distancing and social isolation that were coming from the World Health Organization. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't done that. So I appealed it thinking, well, if a human being looks at this, probably it'll be no problem. And then I got on chat saying, look, this video with that, like with YouTube, because you can get help, sort of. Mm-hmm. And so I talked to a YouTube representative saying, I'm not getting the views that I would expect. I'm wondering if this video, having been removed once erroneously, is affecting the views of this other version. The rep told me, well, the reason this second video hasn't been removed is you explained the context better in your description. And there hadn't been a description on the original upload at all. So the algorithm had read the description and understood the video better, according to the rep. But when I got off the conversation with that rep, the second video was taken down. And so now luckily I didn't get a second strike. It was somehow kind of thought of as one video, even though there was two uploads, which was lucky, because if there had been a second strike, I could have very easily had privileges taken away or even just had the whole channel taken down. And as I sat with this over the course of that day, I realized I was pretty unhappy about having a warning on my channel which said if I did something like this again, on our channel, it's not just mine, it's like the imprint's channel. Mm-hmm. If it happened again, the whole channel could be taken down. And then the appeal came back. A response to the appeal came back right the next day, and it was rejected with a form letter. And there's no way to do another appeal or there's no more process to go through. But to be clear, in none of these, messages from YouTube was it made clear what specifically had violated community standards. So whatever my guess might be about it or what your guess might be about it is speculation. We don't know what they decided. I suspect it was a combination of quoting Alex Jones and then in a sort of cheeky way saying he wasn't a complete idiot, that there was something that was true about what he was saying, even though it's not true that COVID is a hoax, and it's not true that we shouldn't wear masks. Right. It's right. So anyway, so now I'm basically trying to run a PR campaign to get people to see that we have this problem with two hopes. One is to get the attention of YouTube, someone at YouTube who can actually change the situation for me. And the other is to sort of start a conversation around the way that YouTube is being curated. And I would say kind of haphazardly censored. For one, I don't think it's right to impose a standard on YouTube that says you can't dispute the recommendations of the World Health Organization, because those recommendations change. And I remember back in March, they were saying we shouldn't wear masks unless we were having symptoms of COVID, or, and that it might actually make you get COVID to wear a mask. Mm-hmm. So that deservedly was criticized by mainstream journalists at the time. And I think you should be able to critique the World Health Organization, even erroneously, and one other thing I'll say is right now, and last I checked anyway, there's a 2-hour interview with a epidemiologist, or probably not, some sort of doctor out of, I think, Germany, who is saying that everything that the World Health Organization has suggested since COVID, the outbreak of COVID, has been wrong, that the COVID isn't serious, but wearing a mask will kill you. And this is a guy who's a doctor, has all the credentials, and he was given like 2 hours to talk. And that video is still there, as far as I can tell, last time I checked, which I don't think it should be taken down, but it's odd to me that my video was taken down and this one, which directly disputes. I mean, maybe it was because it was put up before the rule change. I don't know.
Right. Okay. So there's a lot of interesting things here. And I guess, so we should say the video, you can't, obviously it's been taken down from YouTube, twice in 2 different iterations, but you can view it on Vimeo. Right, or on your Patreon page, and it's embedded from video. Page, so we'll include the link.
Vimeo's hosting it. Yeah,
we'll include the link on Blogging Heads for the video, and people can watch themselves. It's about 17 minutes or so long, and then you can have your own theory about why the algorithm took this thing down. So I'll say, after I watched it, my theory was it's Alex Jones. So you have in there a fairly substantial excerpt of Jones talking from his show, and I say it's a minute to 90 seconds or something is Jones. And I think, Jones was maybe the first person that sort of has gotten banned. Like, Jones is like, if you're going to ban someone, all these sites are kind of loath to ban prominent people, and they're loath to ban conservatives especially. But if you're going to ban someone, ban Jones. And so he's been banned from YouTube for a while, and I assume, the algorithm somehow knows what Alex Jones looks like or sounds like.
But he was recently interviewed for like 3 hours on Joe Rogan.
Well, Joe Rogan is a very powerful person.
Right.
He is the most popular podcast in America, and sorry, Doug, you do not, and neither do I. I'm not number two. I'm not number 2. So there's that. So Jones is, like one of the most reprehensible Americans alive today, and
Henry Kissinger outstrips him.
Well, how many people, does Henry Kissinger have a podcast? How many?
He doesn't need one.
Well, okay, Kissinger is responsible for the deaths of millions and is probably still alive at like age 93 and obese or whatever. But and I guess he maybe he's whispering in Joe Biden's ear. That's possible. But Jones, a lot more people out there believe what Jones is saying, and that's bad for the world that they believe this shit. So I'm fine with banning Jones, and I'm probably, I guess maybe I'm less of a like sort of free speech libertarian than you are. But so you include Jones, and it's this funny clip. I don't know. I guess he maybe got kicked out of his studio or something. He looks like he's in a hotel room, and he's sitting next to this guy Nick Fuentes, who is this guy who became famous for being the racist college student, and he was at the Unite the Right rally and got kicked out of BU because he was too racist to go to BU, and now he's sort of an alt-right media figure. And he's kind of sitting there looking like a little dork next to, bombastic Alex Jones is doing his shtick, and Fuentes is just like sitting there in a collared shirt or something. But yeah, so I think that would, if it was if I had to lay a bet on one thing, it was that you included too much Alex Jones, that somehow the geniuses who work at YouTube have figured out an an Alex Jones like sorting algorithm or something, and so they knocked it out because of that. So does that make sense to you?
Well, yeah, that could very well be, especially when you take into account that the Twitter that I saw this tweet from this other YouTube channel called what was it, Rationality Rules, where they had put out a video, and I hadn't seen the video, but they put out one debunking conspiracy theories, and I would guess that they were possibly even less cheeky or nuanced or indirect. They were probably more direct than I was in their critique, and they were taken down too. And I would just guess it was because they did it. There were clips from things that had been banned already, or So, but okay, there's two points. One is when Alex Jones was taken down, I put out a video then saying that it was a mistake. And we could talk about why I think it was a mistake to ban Alex Jones. But the other thing is, if something is banned to the extent that you can no longer even quote it in order to criticize it, seems like things are really askew.
Yes, so I agree with that. I mean, did you think about using less, raw footage of Alex Jones when you were putting the video together, or because you kind of did give him his say?
Like I spend like 12 hours, sometimes anywhere from 6 to 12 hours editing a video, like including editing the audio, and I write the thing, which that's a day to write the essay sometimes, and so I'm writing it quickly. I'm editing it quickly. So it's like a 2-day process to make one of these videos, really. And often enough, the decision about how long to make a clip is made once, and like you pointed out, it was a minute and a half. I just didn't think of it that way. And I think the truth was I actually probably had meant to cut it a little bit sooner than I did. Mm-hmm. In the actual edit, because if you remember in the edit of Alex Jones, like I fool around by making emphasizing an extreme close up and then cutting to his hand going up and down and trying to make him look absurd, right? In a typical YouTube way.
So where did you, since he's not on YouTube, and is he on Vimeo?
That was on YouTube. It was a clip that was already on YouTube. There was
so he doesn't have his own channel on there, but he's still...
Yeah, it was like Nick Fuente's channel or something. I didn't even know who that guy was.
Okay, but, so Alex Jones's, little racist intern, or whoever it is, still maintains his channel, and right. and that's the way they get around it. So okay, so that if Fuentes, is maintaining, Alex Jones videos on there, he's no Joe Rogan. He's this, 19-year-old too racist for BU guy. So that would argue against my theory that it's all like Alex Jones. I mean, the other thing is you talk about this thing, the Great Reset, and that is sort of a conspiratorial right-wing phrase. I don't know if it's a QAnon phrase, but it's sort of a right-wing fever swamp thing in the way that the storm or the Great
but
Storm.
But it also is real language that's coming out of the World Economic Forum. It's not coming from QAnon first. It's coming from the World Economic Forum. And before that, and before COVID, the reset concept was coming out of Goldman Sachs and Financial Times.
Okay, so that could, in the same way that George H.W. Bush said New World Order, he said those words, and then that became took on a life of its own in the fervid imaginations of millions of Americans. So that was the only other thing that I thought could have been a red flag. Now I didn't see. I mean, do you think it was the text? They could have been looking at the text also. Like if you had Alex Jones's name in the text, it's obviously much easier to run an algorithm that finds text and finds video clips, I think.
I suspect it was when Alex Jones said, the combination of Alex Jones saying COVID is a hoax, it's no worse than the flu in the clip, which, by the way, that if I had wanted to cut something, would have been that, and it wouldn't have been because I didn't want to set off the algorithm, but it was because that wasn't the subject of the video. The subject of the video was a Great Reset and not whether or not COVID was a hoax. And so anyway, I think it's a combination of that. And then the fact that I come on in voiceover and saying, it's easy to make fun of Alex Jones, but we should try to look at the rational kernel behind the madness or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that's not a strong enough denunciation or denial of the assertions of Alex Jones, maybe. But by the end, I think it's pretty clear that I'm not saying anything about social distancing or masks.
Okay. So do you think until you sent an appeal that a human at YouTube had looked at this, or do you think it was all the algorithms?
Definitely not. No, I don't think. I suspect that you have done more than any human being at YouTube. That you've watched the video,
right?
And I don't think any human being at YouTube has watched the full video. Okay. I mean, anyone in a position to make a decision.
Right. Okay. So
I don't know what their appeal process exactly means. My imagination is there's somebody who clicks on it and they see Alex Jones. That's good enough. I know what it's like to try to decide whether we're going to take a book proposal seriously, right? As a book publisher. And I don't read every book proposal all the way through.
Right.
So I imagine that someone who's going through an appeal process is also making a pretty quick decision on very little information.
Okay. But so you think when you made the appeal, do you think an actual human somewhere did look at it, or you think it was maybe just a different algorithm might have rejected the appeal?
Well, the best case scenario in my mind is a human being looked at it and gave it maybe a minute or 30 seconds to a minute to decide or something like that.
Right. Okay.
But that's the best case. It could very well be another algorithm decides, or that just as an automated no, we're going to reject every appeal.
Yeah, that's possible. I haven't gone through this process myself, but in some ways I've kind of, and I've talked about it on the show before. Kind of this idea that like a lot of the problems and disputes that are arising based on the way we interact online are sort of like essentially forum moderator problems. And someone who was moderating like a comic book forum in 1996 would have the same basic problems as like Twitter and YouTube and Google have now, where it's like there's people fighting who needs to get a timeout or who needs to get banned from the site. It can be hard to say sometimes who first crosses the line, and the person who is doing this deciding is not like a learned judge. There's someone like me, because like I have been a moderator on Blogging Heads
20 years ago. Not even you now, right? I mean,
well, I was on the comic book forum. I was never high enough up in that world. But finally, I do have moderator powers. And one of the funny things is, I guess I've thought about saying this before, but I have moderator powers on the comments on YouTube. And there's sometimes people who are very nasty about me on YouTube, and especially things about my appearance or maybe saying I should be on medication or I'm not on medication or something. And, I don't need to spend a lot. So I'm not an algorithm, but I don't need to spend a lot of time, feeling like I, need to talk to these people and take them aside and have a meeting of the minds. I just click the ban button and then they're gone from the Blogging Heads YouTube channel. For a while or forever, really. There's no appeal process as far as I can see. So that's somewhat, If you ban a commenter, they have no way of contacting you.
At our YouTube channel, and I am, I do not have a consistent approach. Like if you make me feel like you personally insulted me, you're going to get banned.
There's no way to have a consistent approach. It's like, it's like the Supreme Court divides 5-4 on things. Like people, like smart people can disagree, and these aren't even take the ideology out of it. People disagree. I'm thinking there's also this it makes me think of this podcast series that Michael Lewis, the great author, put out over the past year or so called Against the Rules. That's about how the first season is about like judges and referees and how the NBA referees get more and more challenges these days, and there's all this technology tracking whether they're a good ref or not, and you can appeal to the videotape and stuff, and somehow this just makes everyone like angrier and like and more wanting to fight about these things, even though like the appeal process is higher, and saying like who are you, bud, to tell me that that was a travel instead or something else, and it goes into all traffic court and all sorts of other things. But yeah, so some human, in the case of me and you, some humans making the decisions, but in the case of YouTube, it's not even a human. It's not a human. It's an algorithm.
It's a little different than moderating comments on a forum because for a couple reasons. One is it's a platform for people who are creating, I guess it's called content now. And I'm a partner. I get money from the YouTube channel, or our imprint does. And so we have a business relationship there. It's actually unclear now whether or not we're contractors because of the way they're changing their payment structure. So we have a different kind of relationship. I'm not sure what the legality of it actually is. And by the way, I've actually been in contact with an entertainment lawyer to sort of start a conversation about a lawsuit possibly. And I'm not sure if I have standing. I haven't really even had a phone conversation with this person yet, but they are fans of the channel and contacted me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking, well, what avenues do I have? I'm not litigious, but I feel as though it would be worthwhile to raise the issue as far as I can. Not just here comes my cat.
Oh, that's even better. This is the things that only Blogging Heads provides, this kind of content.
Yeah. Anyone who watches me interview people has met my cat lots of times, because
very cute.
What happens is if I am on the computer talking to someone, my cat feels like, oh, he must be really lonely. He's sitting over there talking to himself.
Yes, I don't have any cats currently, but in a past life when I did have a cat, she often would come when I was doing these because she must think like he's talking to me. Like, who else is he talking to? But okay, so but let me. So I think it would be. I mean, it would be interesting to see if there was some sort of if you had standing to sue. And I'm kind of, I don't know. I have a feeling that whenever you created the channel, there was like a very long legal document that maybe you glanced at and you hit I agree.
Yeah,
and it like screws you over for all time.
Over with a lawyer, right? I mean, that document. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's. I mean, I assume YouTube, which is owned by Google, has the best lawyers that money can buy. Who are making it so that they'll almost always win. But let me step back and
probably the idea would be really to raise a legal challenge so that it would be worth their while to actually pay enough attention to examine the issue in our case. And rather than go through the process, like it's a calculation, financial calculation, are we going to spend money on lawyers to lawyer up to defend our decision, or are we just going to take a look at it and settle on this and figure something out? The other reason to do it is to raise the issue in the public imagination, especially on the left, because I think the left has taken the wrong approach to this question. Certainly, the left that would include you. I'm a Marxist and all, so I'm to the left of you. Mm-hmm. But the left that would include a progressive like yourself, I think has taken the wrong position on things like banning Alex Jones and on what we want from these sorts of big monopoly institutions.
Okay, so do you think that? Okay, so there's some things that we can assume YouTube will take down because it's illegal to post, like child pornography. Right. What about regular pornography? Do you think YouTube should take that down?
I understand why you would want to. First of all, there's plenty of places you can get pornography online, right. So it's not a matter of community standards to take it down.
Well, is YouTube a community, or are we all a community in this World Wide Web or something?
We're defining community, but in terms of like the overall internet community or the national community or even the international community,
right? So there's websites that are
doesn't violate those standards now.
There are websites that are essentially YouTube for porn, and they host, and so anyone who wants to find porn can find it very easily. But I assume there are people every day who are trying to upload porn, either porn that they have already on their computer or porn they're like starring themselves to YouTube, because YouTube is the biggest video site on the planet. And I assume there's algorithms that knows the amount of flesh that's on screen or something, and that is blocking that from coming up.
The reason I'm pointing it out is like when we talk about YouTube censoring pornography, or Tumblr went through this as well. We're now talking about how much power the channel should have to curate its own content and create its own identity. Right, rather than community standards or protecting people from speech that's harmful. It's more about what's practical in terms of creating a platform so that people can use it well. I mean, if you have a platform that isn't specifically for porn, that includes porn, it will become probably a much less trafficked platform, because you're not going to know what you're going to get, or it'd be hard to set the parameters. And there are contexts where people would like to go to a video channel and watch videos that are not pornography. It's rare, but it does happen. I would feel as though they should have the right to do that, or at least maybe it's not a matter of right, but it makes sense to me that there should be platforms that exclude certain kinds of content that don't violate community standards, but nonetheless are excluded because of the kind of practical efficiency of having a branded identity or a curated forum.
Right.
But so that's the whole thing about 230. This digital amendment, some sort of amendment to the law around
the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, I believe, which was passed it was before the millennium.
Like 96.
It's from 96, I think. So, a very different form of the internet was around 24 years ago. And, you know.
So, and this is something that's being hotly debated now because as Trump leaves office, and he will leave.
Yeah, I agree.
But as he leaves, he's making noises, and I guess he's saying he's going to veto military expenditure legislation.
Yeah, he says. He's demanding that repealing 230 go in the Defense Department reauthorization or funding bill or something, which doesn't really make sense. Obviously, these things get larded up with unrelated things, but why? There's no national security or something aspect to this. So he's demanding that, and I think I'm of the belief that Trump has no actual political ideology or political beliefs. Really, he just has a series of prejudices.
He's mad at Twitter.
Yeah, he's mad at Twitter for putting putting little things underneath his tweet saying the election results are not actually a dispute or whatever. They're dealing with this may be inaccurate, so he's mad at that. And it's bizarre that he probably wouldn't be president if Twitter didn't exist, and yet that's receives all of his his ire. And so it's strange and stupid. So I don't think that is, if that ever happens, that this thing gets repealed, it's not going to be in the next
But
week
again,
or so.
Just like Alex Jones, there's a rational kernel in what Trump is doing, even though he's doing it in his way, which is always insane. But it is a question, the degree to which these institutions, these big monopoly media platforms, digital media platforms, should be protected from litigation if they're going to be curating their content to the degree that they do.
Right. And so it's kind of like what, and you probably understand this better than I do. It's sort of like it was created to say that you couldn't sue America Online because someone posted something defamatory about a third party on a message board. That was sort of the intent, right. That in the way that you could sue the New York Times maybe if they printed something defamatory about a third party, depending on whether or not they attributed it to someone else, something like that. So
right. And the weird thing is, it was actually, people talk about this as if that was put in place in order to create neutral platforms. But in fact, no, the idea was to protect them from litigation. In order to give them, I've read into this because of my experience. My understanding is you want to give them protection from litigation so that they can moderate their content without fearing that they're going to be now taken to be something other than a neutral platform and actually be treated like a publisher. So you want to make it explicit that they are going to moderate their content, but they're still protected as if they're a neutral utility or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's this sort of it's this approach to it, to trying to give them a business model and protect the public good at the same time, because you don't want everything to be like 4chan. Right.
And even 4chan, limited 4chan some stuff related to child porn and maybe something else. Yeah. And then people made 8chan.
And even 8chan won't traffic in that stuff anymore.
Yeah. There's no such thing as an unmoderated web forum of any forum in a loose sense, because it eventually will be run over by child porn and Nazis, and then all the normal people leave.
By the way, we should differentiate. Child porn is absolutely 100% and should be illegal.
Yeah, child porn is illegal. Being a Nazi is not illegal, but most people don't want to hang around somewhere where there are a lot of Nazis, and so they leave and go somewhere else.
Right.
So, okay, well, so the one thought I've had about this is these issues of free speech online. I don't know. I guess I'm, I think maybe the past 5+ years have changed how much of a free speech believer I am, because I think, the people who are in the intellectual dark web and the people who are, signing the Harper's letter and stuff, they think they're we're being silenced and blah, blah, blah. But I think they're wrong in that. But the problem isn't that people are being silenced. The problem is that there's too many people talking. This is 25 years ago, we thought it would be good if everyone has a voice and is talking. And it turns out it's probably bad, because most people are very stupid and they just fight with each other, and they don't add anything to society on net. And they're probably both more miserable afterwards. So
are you sure you're not just wanting to eliminate the competition for Blogging Head Patreon money?
Well, yeah. So
I know.
Blogging Heads is an example. I mean, started in 2005, 15 years it's been this past month. But obviously, this is an entirely online format and wouldn't have existed 25 years ago. Impossible for it to exist 25 years ago. And is it good or bad that it exists? I think it's good. It's employed me for a long time. But but like Blogging Heads is curated. I'm one of the editors at Blogging Heads. It's not just like anyone can come on and post something. So it's not like the utility like thing of YouTube really. It's more like a magazine or something. But anyway, yeah. So there's I think we'd be better off with less speech, not more speech.
YouTube channel. Blogging Heads used to be its own video platform.
That's true.
And now it's moved mostly over to. I mean, I think
it's on YouTube. It's also an audio podcast, which is distributed in a much more decentralized way through RSS feeds and stuff like that. So YouTube could conceivably take down this episode for some reason if we say the words Alex Jones too many times. But the podcast version is like has this distributed network sort of thing, so it's much harder to take down.
I have my own podcast too, and Zero Books is distributed in lots of different ways. We publish books. It's not as though if our YouTube channel gets taken down, we don't have a platform anymore. Zero Books will continue on. It will only hurt our publicity efforts, and if our YouTube channel is taken down. But I tell you, I spent a lot of time on that YouTube channel, probably a little bit too much, and it would hurt the imprint for it to be taken down.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is when you went from being your own website that you paid for and curated to being a YouTube channel as well, or instead of, you went from one sort of model for Blogging Heads to another. Now you're playing in the field of, you're competing. The crazy thing is like some kid who gets his parents' phone and talks into it and walks around in his front yard and says something like, I'm thinking of a specific kid, says, I love communism. And he's like 8 years old. That kid will probably outperform you and have a bigger channel.
I would like to talk to that kid and know what his secrets are. But yeah, so there's all these people younger than I am who are use this platform much more effectively than I ever do. But okay, so just getting back a little bit to sort of my anti-free speech.
But that's part of the whole thing of like everyone's talking. It's like everyone's talking, and there's no good filter.
Yeah, so there's no filter. Okay, so if it was 1995. And I was the age I was now, and I had something I wanted to share with the world. Well, what could I do? I could write a letter to either my local paper, the New York Times. I could maybe try to get a book deal or something. But if I was just a regular person, that's hard to do. You need an agent. I could. How
old are you, by the way?
I'm 30. I'm 37.
Okay, so in 1995, I was 24, and I was trying to get short stories published, and I had my first email address at Yahoo, and I believe it was like 96 or 97. I was on something called Live Journal, and I was on I had a blog.
Okay, but just in the pre-internet era.
Right, pre-internet. So I'm sorry.
I could go through traditional media. Try to get a gatekeeper of traditional media to let me put my words on their product, or I could photocopy my message and put them under windshields or on community bulletin boards, or I could just stand on the corner and I could on a soapbox and I could say my piece, and maybe if I was being too disruptive, someone would come and tell me I had to leave. So and almost. It would be virtually impossible for me to go viral in the pre-internet sense in that system because of the gatekeepers. No matter what my message was, very unlikely that it was ever going to strike a nerve or anything or whatever. And that was the understanding of free speech for 200 plus years of the existence of the First Amendment was you can buy your own printing press and print your own pamphlets and stuff and distribute them, but it wasn't. There was no ability for a person with zero means or zero connections or something to get something, spread nationally, let alone globally. So there's been a really radical change That's happened very, very quickly, and I don't think we've sort of thought about it enough because we're like stuck in the middle of it as it's happening. So now any crazy person can film a rant and on their phone, upload it, it goes viral, everyone's like, oh, look at this crazy guy, and then everyone is going nuts about it until 12 hours later something else happens and we're just distracted into that thing. And if the guy is like saying, COVID is a hoax by Bill Gates, the ones with put a chip in your brain or something, then that's, they'll get a million hits. But whereas that guy 30 years ago would have been the crazy person on the corner and people would have been like crossing the street to avoid him. So,
I mean, I just remember Jerry Springer and there's Dr. Phil and hell, there's the lead up to the invasion of Iraq, where the New York Times put out lots of misinformation that led to a major war. And the other thing is I come out of like in the 90s, one of the first things I did as a writer was publish my own zine.
Right, yeah. So
and get it listed in Fact Sheet 5. And, I was there next to the UFO zines and the white supremacist zines, in this big list of, not because I fit in those categories, okay, but just because, there was a whole smorgasbord of fringe material that was listed in Fact Sheet 5, but I was proud to be listed with all the other kooks in that directory,
right.
And
but even doing that, okay, so obviously, like Alex Jones, for all of his faults, I assume works very hard to get his product out there. But also, you just have people who,
and he came up through traditional radio.
Right. Yeah. He's in Waking Life.
Right.
Linklater film came out in 2002.
Early. That was he had been around in the 90s. He
was stuck in Austin. He didn't have national exposure. But anyway, it's so, even having it together enough to photocopy and distribute a zine, that shows you at least have something going on versus, and it was the white supremacists and the UFO guys and the flat earthers were doing it too, versus now it's just an 8-year-old child or whatever can do it and go viral. But yeah, I just think there's just so much garbage that is produced. And the thing is, we assume that when your video was taken down, an algorithm did it the first time, and then maybe a human looked at it the second time, but there's no way we can really know that now. Right. It's impossible for YouTube to have humans looking at all this stuff. There's too much stuff, obviously, and it's in every human language.
This is the problem.
So it'd be impossible for humans to do it. We don't, the company will go bankrupt if they required a human to watch every single video and check it off, whether it's, passes whatever test. So, and, it would take lifetimes of viewing to see what was uploaded every hour or something insane like that. Yeah. So there's way too much content for humans to actually moderate it. So they use the algorithms because it's impossible for humans to do it. And also you don't have to pay the algorithm a living wage or whatever. So, so that it makes sense why they use the algorithms. But the algorithm is humans are fallible. We know that sometimes judges make the wrong choice, and algorithms are made by humans. So you're not going to have the perfect algorithm either. So it's possible that the algorithm simply made a mistake in something we don't even understand about the video that it saw and triggered its whatever, or it just has this idea that no Alex Jones or something, or no saying Great Reset, or no saying WHO or something. And the other thing I just want to add your thoughts on this. I have a feeling that if this had happened, if you had uploaded the video 3 months ago, it might have been different because they know that Biden is coming in and the Democrats are very angry about the things that social media have led to over the past couple years. And so they're going to be looking a lot more closely at it than the Trump administration ever did. And so it's time to kiss up to the Democrats instead of kissing up to Trump.
I really hope you're wrong, because that makes me hate Biden more.
Okay, well, you're a Marxist. What's the material? Look at that. What's the material analysis here?
Well, my thought was that the reason why they're clamping down is because of the second spike.
It's possible that too, although I think they probably care more about money than they care about people dying who they don't know,
Yeah, that's
probably. Am I out-Marxing you right now?
No, you are a little bit. You're being more cynical than I was. Yes, it could be that they're trying to prepare now for what they perceive to be the threat of more restrictions or more demands from a censorious Biden administration.
Mm-hmm.
But all I can say is that if you start going down this road of censoring every conspiracy theory that can't be justified, Rachel Maddow will be thrown off next. And the idea that we've seen the last of the right-wing Republicans is ridiculous too. And I would hate to see a right-wing Republican administration try to censor expression based on their political ideology the way that people seem to think it's okay for liberal Democrats to do. So that I'll say that. But the other thing is, like, if we try to be realistic about what we want right now from YouTube, like what I want and what YouTubers might want, it's difficult because we are trading on the fact that it's a giant platform, that it is a monopoly. That's what gives us the power to reach such a big audience, because it has so many users. And if I had to go to every single different kind of platform that might reach the same level of audience and put up videos and try to get involved, it would just be impossible. So that's the perk of YouTube, is that it's a monopoly.
It also works very well.
It does.
I mean, that's just another thing. Like, one of the reasons blogging heads and YouTube started the same year, 2005. Right. Obviously, the trajectories have been somewhat different, but right. YouTube, but Bloggheads was more like a content thing, whereas YouTube is a platform that. But right. Originally, like the video, like Bloggheads had his own video software developed by this guy Greg Dingle, who later went to work for Facebook, and so it was still somewhat novel in 2005 to see video on the web that worked consistently, because YouTube wasn't really a thing yet, and so you had to like download like a real audio player or a real player or something to get the file, and then half the time it wouldn't work or something. And so I mean, there's a reason that YouTube has network effects made it that, like, the first site that did this very well, it was very likely that they would become a giant monopoly. But like it really does work. Taking aside all of our complaining about it, like, if you want to find a video, you'll find it, and it almost always plays. Like it does right. work well.
Yeah, so right, it does work well. So those are all good things about YouTube, but they're also the fact that it's such a powerful monopoly is also a problem. So I'm thinking about this right now as, like, as a YouTuber, as a YouTube creator, or what have you, whatever you want to call it, me. If I were to join together with other YouTube creators and say we should try to make a demand of our employer, the demand I think I would make is that that the value of free speech is put at the top of the list of values when determining community standards, that there are no community standards that limit scientific inquiry or debate. So that will mean that a lot of things that make people uncomfortable would be not excluded from the outset. But that the standards should be around defamation of character, calls for violence, and then some pornography. And I would even go so far as to say, if you want to say no anti-Semitism, or if you want to have a list of words that aren't allowed to. I mean, it'd be all right with me if you couldn't say fuck on YouTube, right? But I would rather not be able to say fuck, but say the World Health Organization is wrong, and if you wear a mask, it's going to kill you. You're going to suffocate on that mask. I'd much rather have that be the standard, because that claim is so absurd on its face, and when you say you can't make it, that's what gives these conspiracy guys some sense of power, because they're being suppressed. And
yes, yeah, it's. I mean, dealing with people who believe in conspiracy theories is a growing problem. And actually, it makes me think. Are you aware of Kirby Ferguson, the filmmaker who made a documentary about conspiracy theories? Does his name ring a bell?
No, his name doesn't, but I should maybe.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. We'll put it below. He also made Everything's a Remix. That was his first thing that went big. He's been on the show 2 or 3 times, I think. But anyway,
that's probably where I know him from.
That's possible. But he made a documentary. So it's interesting when we look at the copyright claim aspect of this also. So he makes documentaries. Almost all of his footage is pre-existing footage from movies, TV shows, music videos, other documentaries that he's remixing.
Same with my stuff.
So that would be considered fair use, I guess, but it's possible to think that someone would put in a copyright claim or the algorithm would detect a copyright claim or something. But I think it's usually he does the voiceover and the music, but the images are from like old westerns and stuff like this. Anyway, he made this thing about conspiracy theory video. That like a short documentary, like 45 minutes. I watched it. I thought it was very entertaining. I tweeted it out, and just within the past week or so, I saw he said it was taken down also. And he was doing like a public appeal on Twitter. And the last thing I saw
taken down from YouTube.
Taken down from YouTube. The last thing I saw was that someone from Twitter responded to him on saying, someone from YouTube on Twitter responded to him saying like, "We'll look at this." But it may have been a similar thing. So maybe it's that. They know that YouTube knows that YouTube is the biggest like conspiracy theory promoting platform in the world right now, and they've radicalized people unintentionally with their crazy algorithm that rewards intense like engagement and devotion as opposed to anything else. So this is not news at this point. If you like, maybe you're vaguely interested in conspiracy theories, you watch a video about the JFK assassination, and then there's one about flat Earth, and you're like, oh, I'll click on that, and then it suggests one to you about how the flat Earth is run by the Jews, and you click on that one, and then it's the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, and you're deep in the hole at this point, and it's all just the algorithm thinking what other people engage with intensely, because intense engagement is a way to keep people looking at the ads that pay for YouTube. So it could be the conspiracy theory angle is what they are cracking down on, and maybe just if you had the word conspiracy theory in there. Maybe, who knows? Maybe that's it. It's kind of a black box.
Yeah, when I went onto YouTube to type in JFK conspiracy, and all I find are debunked videos from very mainstream sources at the top of the search right now. So you could be right. It's funny
that the people, the executives at Google or whatever, finally got embarrassed enough about all this shit that they're like, okay, we need to do something because like our nieces and nephews hate us because we're promoting QAnon and other ridiculous things.
But I've never been able to find a QAnon video on YouTube. Maybe that's just because, I mean, like, it's only in the last couple months that I thought it would be worth knowing what QAnon was about, right? And so I did my usual thing, and being lazy, I went to YouTube and said, what is QAnon? And I got mainstream media people who were as confused and bewildered as I am about it. Like they'd be asking, what is QAnon?
Well, that's interesting.
Well, we don't know.
Maybe if you had done that a year ago, it would have been different. I mean, they're always tweaking the algorithm for their own ends, and those ends aren't always society's ends. One other little kind of like micro example of this that I noticed recently is that, I think probably one of the main ways that people find new content on YouTube is like the column in the right-hand side that's like videos you might enjoy or something, and that's algorithmically generated based on the one you're watching. And I was looking at one of my own videos on Blogging Heads, and all the ones it was suggesting were Glenn Lowry ones. And I was like, well, if people like Aryeh Cohen-Wade, they're not necessarily going to like Glenn Lowry. Like, there was like one Aryeh video in there of the 150 that are up. It was all Glenn stuff. What's the reason? I think it's because Glenn has a very passionate following. He's the most popular one on Blogging Heads, but he's also the one that really, like, people are watching an hour video, whereas when they look at mine, maybe they jump ship after 10 minutes or so.
I've been watching Glenn for a long time, and I've interviewed him a couple times now, and I have noticed him shift to the right.
Oh, he's definitely shifted to the right.
2 or 3 years. And I wonder the degree to which, maybe unconsciously, it's because that's rewarded by audience approval. It's
possible. And it's well known that, conservatives dominate the politics section of YouTube, with, Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson videos. And so actually when there's some sort of overlap between people like blogging as people like Jordan Peterson or something, or the algorithm thinks there is. And so when I looked in like an incognito window, so it wouldn't know who I was, one of my own videos, what's on the side? It's a couple of mine, and then mostly Glenn and Jordan Peterson. So I am not like really close to Jordan Peterson anyway, and I have critiqued him and made fun of him a lot on this show. But the people who watched Jordan Peterson videos, like they'll watch a 2.5 hour lecture because he has these very, very committed fans who are very engaged with the content, and that's like the ideal fan from YouTube's perspective because they can run a bunch of ads or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Our channel kind of arrived by critiquing Jordan Peterson. Like one of the, the reason we grew from 8,000 subscribers to 50,000 is because of Zizek and Jordan Peterson. So yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing. And one of the things that I think might happen to left-wing media over the next 4 years is that our big adversary has dropped away, and we're going to lose clicks now that Trump is gone.
Right.
Yeah, you can't ride on the coattails of Trump with your anti-Trump rhetoric, and our audience isn't going to reward an anti-Biden rhetoric the same way it's rewarded an
right. So okay, well, let's just discuss this briefly, kind of like the future, and especially for left-wing media when a lot of the infrastructure is corporate owned. So Trump will be leaving soon. He won't be president anymore. I guess he'll still be causing a ruckus or something. Right. But a lot fewer people are going to be watching Rachel Maddow once Trump is gone because the sense of emergency is gone, and looking at it from a like vulgar Marxist perspective, Fox News would much rather have like Obama in office than Trump in office because they can rile people up about Obama much more easily than they can rile people up about Trump, and because it's easier to get people like super excited in a negative sense than positive
Trump
sense.
may be an exception for Fox because he had such a passionate, positive following, and people loved him, and that may have brought as many people to Fox as it brought to MSNBC. But certainly, like if George W. Bush or like if Mitt Romney had won, or that would have been bad for Fox for sure.
Right. So Biden is kind of a boring person. Like Obama was an exciting person, Trump was an exciting person, Biden more of a boring person. So I think probably ratings are going to go down across the board because there will be people who are like, okay, I'm going to get back into my hobbies instead of listening to podcasts or something. Or I'm going to listen to a comedy podcast or true crime or something instead of politics. So I think it's going to be. So I think there's that. But yeah, like the fact that YouTube is part of a giant corporate conglomerate. And then you are critiquing capitalism within it. I mean, YouTube could just be like, all the Marxists, you're gone. Like, don't you think they could just do that?
Right.
And that would be within their rights?
Say again?
Like, could you sue YouTube if they were just like, all the Marxists
No, they could get rid of me on so many grounds. If they decided that I was full of misinformation because I believed in the labor theory of value, which goes against the orthodoxy of economists at Harvard and Yale and wherever, they could just get rid of me on the same basis that they get rid of people who say that COVID is a hoax. The consensus of the expert class is against my position, right? So I mean, this is one of the reasons why I am so adamantly for free speech, is because my own position would easily be marginalized and erased if it wasn't for that position, right?
Yeah, I even though I said some anti-free speech stuff, that makes a ton of sense to me, and is definitely a good aspect of the First Amendment. But I think, I mean, do you see like the podcast genre or medium, because it doesn't rely on one for-profit corporation, that is maybe more where left-wing stuff should go, and just get away from the evil, rapacious, monopolistic capitalists?
Like the biggest podcast around is for the left in America, for like the socialist left, is Chapo Trap House. Right. And they're huge. They make like $1 million a year or something. I don't know how much they make, but they make a lot of money, and I like them. And actually I may, I should keep that under wraps. I've had them on our podcast, and
Will Menaker has been on with Bob, and I actually had Felix Peterman somewhat before he was famous doing his character. Do you remember that character he used to do? That was the pundit, sort of making fun of like Chris Cillizza type people. Well, I can't remember. He did that character on my show.
Matt Christman, who after Bernie Sanders lost, kind of started vlogging from his backyard.
Yes, I've seen some of those, and those were posted on YouTube, weren't they?
Yeah, they were, and but I think they started on Twitch and then they get reposted on YouTube, and it's clear this is a man who's been spiritually devastated and is reinventing himself after the destruction of the Bernie Sanders campaign, and I enjoy it because it's so authentic and he's fun. But the thing to remember about them is they came out of Brooklyn. They came out. I think they were formerly associated with Gawker. It's what I've heard, that they were from Gawker, the Gawker universe. Well,
I think some of those guys sort of emerged out of the Something Awful forums, which was this sort of part of those people moved on to Twitter and created weird Twitter like Drill and Crushing Bork and those people. Rob Delaney, I don't know if Delaney was on Something Awful, but a lot of those people honed this sort of weird comedic instinct. And then, which was very like absurd and dark and had lots of typos in it. And then, so some of those people became big on Twitter. And I think those guys were sort of in that mix back in the day. So that was a web forum that was just for like weirdo comedy freaks.
I'm not saying that that's the only thing they did, but my understanding was, I've heard, I should ask Matt, that they came up in Brooklyn, that they came out of a relatively elite academic scene as well, and that they had connections. Like pretty early on, they were being featured on the cover of, at least getting like New York Times or New Yorker coverage.
Right. Well, Menaker's father, who passed away a couple months ago, was the fiction editor at the New Yorker, I think. I'm not sure about the other ones, but
right, yeah. So there you go. So they rely on maybe old institutional power to be as big as they are. Not me and Dad in talent and insight, but just to toot my own horn a little bit, I started a podcast while I was a Comcast sales rep at the age of 37, and just started a free podcast on Podomatic, and ended up where I am now because of that. And it's taken me like 12 years, and I'm nowhere, I'm still just as tiny as a podcaster, just tiny marginal, like 3,000 downloads a week or something. YouTube is much more successful for our content than the podcast, although the podcast brings people who are really intensely interested. So, I mean, how many downloads a week does Blogging Heads get generally?
I probably shouldn't reveal that number, but I mean, if you look at, you can see what the various things are in terms of.
It's like 3 to 5
in terms of streams.
Episode.
Yes, streams on YouTube, and then there's also podcast audience. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, so the algorithm, the mysterious algorithm that recommends things on YouTube, is a great way for something to sort of go viral and for people to find things. So people started finding Glenn. Glenn always had a large following compared to the other shows on Blogging Heads, but it was after the Black Lives Matter protests broke out that suddenly people found him. I don't know how that happened exactly, if the algorithm somehow started directing people to him, but his, he's like shot up since then. So it's strange until he presents a sort of counter narrative of about what's happening with race in America.
He's perfect for people who don't want to support Black Lives Matter.
Right.
But who don't want to feel like they're racist.
Exactly.
They can point to Glenn Lowry and say, look, even Glenn Lowry agrees with me. And by the way, I say that, and I think a lot of Glenn Lowry's critiques have some merit, but it is kind of funny how these things work demographically. But the point I was making is, I think the days of podcasting, I think podcasting has always relied on institutional support to really blow up. You can do it through, longevity and hard work, but you're probably, without getting some sort of institutional support,
because there's
probably not going to become huge.
There's no, there's still no easy way to discover a new podcast that doesn't have institutional support. It's like Apple controls so much of it through their podcast app, and they, they're going to recommend something from the New York Times or Crooked Media or something. I mean, things can bubble up that are essentially just random people, random comedians or something. They don't always have to have institutional support, but it certainly helps. And the fact that Blogging Heads has been an institution of sorts, but like, and we've partnered with big institutions like the New York Times and the Atlantic over the years. But if we were put into the Crooked Media feed or something, it would go up by 10 times or something like that. But,
right. Yeah. Right. So I just think that podcasting is not going to be it's not a more natural fit than for people who want to get an audience than YouTube or some of these other, like basically YouTube, because I think that you can actually have a faster, easier path to a major audience or larger audiences on YouTube than you can through podcasting. Not as good an audience, but bigger.
Yeah, well, that is another thing of are you caring about the numbers, or are you caring about the like sort of people who are watching it? And if you're trying to make money off of it, then maybe that matters. If you need people who
Patreon is your major thing.
Yeah,
you want
exactly
big, and then funnel the good into the Patreon. That's what you want.
It kind of, I mean, it depends. Like, I have a sense that the podcast audiences are more affluent than YouTube audiences because you're more likely to listen. This is like my folk wisdom. You're more likely to be listening to a podcast on your commute to work. Whereas if you're watching hours and hours of YouTube all day, maybe you don't have a job.
Probably unemployed.
Yeah, exactly. Now, these days, commutes are gone, and now we're all stuck in front of our computers anyway. So, maybe that's changing, but it is a little bit more. Well, it's hard to say. You see the type of comments that people who are commenting on YouTube comment, and maybe this will produce some even more of this type of comment below this video, but like they're often really, really bad and just total nonsense, bullshit, like bizarre, garbage.
We get less of that than probably Blogging Heads does, or you do, because the people who are going to watch I get one kind of comment over and over again from right wingers, I think mostly, who land on our site, which is nothing that you said made any sense to me at all. It's just a bunch of word salad. I don't understand anything you're saying. And I chalk that up to them never encountering the arguments that I'm making before and not having a quick sound bite that's already pre-programmed into them to respond with. And I get some personal insults like your tongue is fat or something. I mean, that's my favorite one. But it's strange. For the most part, I get even on YouTube, we get really insightful, supportive.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah, maybe the blogging yet. Maybe I'll, did you see that tweet that went viral where this guy said, "You disgusting worms"? He was criticized as a young adult author. I don't know how much you're on Twitter, so it's like all you blogging commenters.
Was that aimed at you?
Well, it was aimed at everyone who was criticizing YA. There's all this running bizarre stuff having to do with young adult literature versus like the Western canon. And there was this guy who was just like, "You disgusting worms," people who don't acknowledge the greatness of YA. But anyway, yeah. So it's like, all the disgusting worms out there who are commenting below this probably they don't like me in particular. But so maybe that's coloring my coloring my stance against them. Okay, we've gone on longer than I thought, but I did want to ask you about one other thing, which is in the video you talk about Christopher Lasch, and that's someone who I really know almost nothing about, except that he taught at the University of Rochester, where I worked very briefly, and people there still remember him fondly. But could you just say what is the Christopher Lasch angle to all of this?
Okay, I read Christopher Lasch probably for the first time in the 90s. I've been on the left for a long, long time, so I encountered his book. There was a book called The Agony of the Left, which I bought in paperback and read and hated when I read it the first time when I was in my 20s, because he was so critical of the left, and he was sort of breaking a lot of taboos in that book from my perspective. But then I couldn't just dismiss him because he was clearly on the left himself, and he wasn't completely wrong. Then there's the other book that I didn't like very much when I first read it either, which is The Culture of Narcissism. And I didn't like that because I was a novelist or short story writer at the time who loved metafiction. and he was so critical of like Kurt Vonnegut and Coover and John Barth in Culture of Narcissism as figures that were emblematic of the narcissistic turn in our culture. Okay, so now fast forward to last 5 years.
So he's primarily a cultural critic?
He's a cultural critic.
More than a political critic?
I would say he's both. I mean, The Agony of the Left is a cultural analysis of the left from the perspective of a socialist. So in 1969, when that book was published, he was definitely part of a radical milieu. He thought of himself as a socialist. He was sort of advocating for an American socialism in the style of the old Socialist Party of America. There's lots of things going on in that book, which when I first read it, I wasn't, to me, Socialist Party of America, Communist Party USA, Bolsheviks, Mensheviks, who cares? Right? in 1993. So now flash forward to today, Christopher Lasch has an entirely different cachet than he did when I first encountered him, which is probably he didn't have any back then, not much of any, because I think I might have encountered him more like 95 or 96. He died in 94, I think. Now he has been held up by our own Angela Nagel as a major influence on her work. He is someone who is sort of the icon of anti-woke leftism, maybe, or one of the icons of anti-woke leftism, because he critiques, like one of his books is called The Revolt of the Elites, and it's all about critiquing the liberal progressive establishment left that is attacking the working class family, as would be something he never says things as simply as I just said, and his ideas and critiques are always immensely thoughtful. He was a very thoughtful person, but nonetheless, he thought there was something to be salvaged in the traditional family, whether it was an extended family or a nuclear family, and that he thought that the mobile, professional, statist elites were disconnected from everyday working people and were failing to see the values that were significant, that still were embodied by traditional extended families and family life and community life and rural life even. That while those things couldn't just be held on to in a socially conservative way, that the values that they had and the things that they provided for working people were real things and they needed to be considered rather than dismissed. And this for Lasch, the idea of bureaucrats going into the family home and dictating to parents how they should raise their kids and taking kids away from families, this was a real travesty, and showed the poverty of the left's mentality as a kind of left working class politics behind and became administrators. So that's why he's popular now, is that he's really good at, if you hate like Elizabeth Warren and loved Bernie Sanders more, and you are tired of being told that you're a sexist, racist, cisgendered, toxic, masculine, whatever on Twitter, Christopher Lasch might be your guy. And he certainly is. Like the people at Red Scare like him, and Angela Nagel likes him, and I think he's really worth reading, and I like him too. But I've been, as I explored him in these videos, I've been actually fairly critical of him as well, because he's just not an orthodox Marxist. He's, from my perspective, he's not part of my little sectarian group, so I have to attack him. But anyway, yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, as someone who is not on the, it was a liberal, not a leftist, but also follows a lot of leftists on Twitter and just kind of follows what people are saying. The battles there over Nagel, and whether she is really good or really bad. And I mean, Red Scare, I don't know, obviously those are not the same things. Red Scare is more of an entertainment podcast.
Yeah.
But Yeah, it's interesting and confusing. I mean, maybe there should be an explainer video about all this stuff.
Well, I've been fairly critical of some of the things Nagel has been saying lately.
Mm-hmm.
I think what happened in Angela Nagel is that she got so sick of being attacked by so many different kinds of leftists that she pretty much hates everyone who calls himself a leftist today. And I do too, but I try to hold it in.
Right, and we should say that the original reason that you came on the show 3.5 years ago was that I contacted you or you contacted me about having Nagel on somewhat before she hit it big, and so I read her book and she was like ready to come on, and then a lot of that book was critiquing the alt-right, and she received like death threats and stuff, and so she realized, or she decided she didn't want to have her face on camera at that.
She wasn't getting death threats at that moment, I don't think, from alt-right figures. The big problem for her has always been from the radical liberal left. But she did get some attacks from alt-right people, but they were not nearly as vicious or as sustained. So I don't remember her getting death threats from.
Okay, yeah, I could be misremembering, but she did. Yeah, she basically decided
I don't want to be
going through the gauntlet.
I don't want to be online anymore. I don't want to be publicly online.
Yeah. Going through the gauntlet, she didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember finding that book very interesting, and I wonder how rereading it now that things have changed. Also, the alt-right, it was somewhat overexposed, or like they were not as big a deal as we thought it was for a certain length of time, around the time when Trump won the election. And then speaking of censorship, a lot of those people got kicked off of various platforms. The people who would send me, putting Jews in oven memes on Twitter, they're all gone. Because sometimes I look for my old tweets and all those people, it just says account suspended. So either they left and went back to their hobbies, or Twitter kicked them off for sending abusive stuff to people.
I'm sure they were kicked off. Yeah, and that kind of thing, that if someone's sending you, I don't know if you're Jewish, I guess, right? I mean, someone's sending a Jewish man Nazi propaganda and cartoons from the Nazi era of Germany, that's obviously a personal attack. That can't be tolerated. That's well beyond that's crossing the line into death threats and that kind of stuff. So I think that should be thrown out.
Yeah. So I think part of and the debacle that became the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville that also took the steam out of a lot of it, and maybe people who were sort of like casual fellow travelers were kind of like, oh, this is horrible, and I'm gonna like get back into like video games instead of like the politics stuff that I was into for the last year.
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, I think So anyway,
to do something about Christopher Lasch. One last thought about Christopher Lasch, which is that Christopher Lasch is an important person to read now because he was critiquing the left at a moment where, while it didn't know it entirely, it was falling apart. His first book, The Agony of the Left, is 1969. He continued to work on critiquing American culture and the left culture all the way to the end, and which was in the 90s. But so in the 70s and 80s, he was this consistent critic of the left's missteps and of American culture's missteps, but also of the way capitalism was transforming society. And I think a lot of the things that he said then, unfortunately, continue to be the case today, because many of the tactics and ideas that dominated the left in the new left era have continued on. We haven't really learned as much as we need to, and reading Christopher Lasch again is worthwhile.
So if someone like me who has never read him at all, is there some place you would recommend starting?
Yeah, Culture of Narcissism. It influenced Jimmy Carter. That's probably what he's most well known for. Okay. Carter's Malaise on America speech came together after he had read Lasch and spoken to him, had him to the White House. Oh,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very different era than what we've been going through now. Okay, so why don't we end it there? So you the investigation continues as to this particular video, and
everyone should go and tweet at YouTube to change it and to put my video back online.
and who knows? It's possible it will be back on there by the time this is posted. But if not, the video is on. We'll include the link to it, which is on your Patreon page. It's public, and you can watch it as a Vimeo embed, and people can make up their own minds about whether or not it should have been taken down, which I think almost any human would say no, but also like why did
yeah.
some.
You
why did
thought
they think
it was, I remember you said to me in my own imagination that you thought it was brilliant. And it was a travesty that the video was taken.
Well,
down.
it is. I mean, it's mysterious why this did happen, and and so much of online life is governed by these algorithms that we have no access to them, and it's like we're like the feeling like the blind wise man or whatever, feeling the elephant or something. We just have these like little emanations of what could possibly be going on behind the scenes, so I wonder if that there's gonna be more of a political movement that's not just like the crazy Trump stuff, Section 230, but more like even you claim the algorithm is proprietary information, but it's like in the public interest for these things to be, public and studied by people outside of Google and Facebook and stuff. So that seems like there might be energy behind that over the next couple of years.
I hope so. So I don't know if this will make it into the video or not, but I want to point out one other thing to you, which is back to Christopher Lasch. Recently, as I was rereading, I'm not sure if it was Culture of Narcissism or one of his other books, but I've been rereading a couple of them. But Lasch quotes Mickey Kaus.
Really?
In one of his books, as a prominent leftist.
A prominent wait.
Yeah, so
Mickey Kaus, prominent leftist?
Yeah, Mickey Kaus was part of the SDS, right? Students for Democratic Society, wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, he's
that was back in the day.
Yeah, but, he was at Harvard Law, I believe, Harvard and Harvard Law. But yeah, I guess I don't actually. I mean, well, maybe this is a question we can we can find out the answer to.
Mickey, and I've asked him if he will come on our channel to discuss his transformation from being a member of SDS to being a right-wing Trumper.
Right.
And I have not received an email back. I emailed him right before Thanksgiving, so that's maybe why. But if you talk to Mickey, tell him I'm wanting to talk to him. And we can start with the quote in the Christopher Lasch book. I'll track it down. Okay,
very interesting. So people who don't know, Mickey Kaus, co-founder of Blogging Heads, and has come back on the site this past year talking to Robert Wright, one of the other co-founders. But someone who was definitely moved to the right and voted for Trump twice for reasons that a lot of people are still scratching their heads over. But
all about immigration and the workers' rights. It's just twisted. We got to make income equality happen by suppressing labor, and it's weird. But
yeah,
anyway.
I don't really understand it. But yeah, okay, Mickey, the challenge has been publicly, the gauntlet's been thrown down publicly, and maybe it'll happen someday. Okay, so Doug, thank you for coming on. So we'll include links to stuff, but if people want to find your channel, is it Zero Books? Is the number YouTube, zero or
zero? Just spell it out. Zero Books.
Okay.
And if you type in my name into YouTube, you should find it as well. But Zero Books is the best way to search for it. We have our own. It's through John Hunt Publishing. That's the publishing company that owns the imprint. Mm-hmm. So you can go to John Hunt Publishing and find us there and buy books. We have a podcast that you can find on most podcast apps, and and we have a Patreon. People should go, and when they're done supporting Blogging Heads on Patreon, go support Zero Books.
Sounds good. And people can follow me on Twitter at RACW, or they can subscribe to this show on their podcast app, Culturally Determined, which might be a good thing to do, and you can rate and review it and all that other stuff. So, Doug, thanks for coming on. I hope the mystery solved, the video restored, and thanks to our viewers and listeners, and we'll see you again next time.
All right.